Hello, everyone. Oops. Thank you for joining us today. I am very excited to be welcoming Secretary Buttigieg to Doraville. Our city's existence is rooted in transportation infrastructure, and it was actually founded nearly 150 years ago today at this very location of the Doraville MARTA station, which at the time was a train stop. Modern Doraville was built out in the 1950s and 60s during the last infrastructure boom. This gave our city many logistical advantages that have made us a transportation nexus for Metro Atlanta. Notably, our easy access to freeways and to MARTA. At the same time, this Eisenhower era development privileged automobiles at the expense of pedestrians, bike riders, and public transit users. The new freeways also split our community into several pieces, creating mobility challenges and exacerbating inequality. Funding from the federal government is already helping us address these disparities with more equitable 21st century infrastructure. Congresswoman McBath has requested community infrastructure funding to help address pedestrian safety along Beaufort Highway, for which we are very grateful. Also, the Federal Transit Administration has provided flex funding to help us make New Peachtree Road, which is right behind me, a more walkable and bikeable place. We hope that this progress continues with the pending infrastructure bill that is being finalized in Congress. As I close, I'd just like to take a moment to encourage our leaders in Congress and the administration to support a project that would add bus rapid transit to planned toll lanes along I-285. This I-285 top-end bus rapid transit project would turn lanes that were initially conceived of as a way to get rich people out of traffic into lanes that would help get everybody around, connecting those without vehicles with our metro area's job centers. The Doraville MARTA station would be a key piece of the bus rapid transit puzzle, connecting bus rapid transit to MARTA's existing rail lines. A project like this won't be able to happen without federal funding, so if I could make one request today, it'd be that the federal government prioritize funding projects like these that reflect multimodal priorities. So again, thank you for being out here, and it's my pleasure to welcome Secretary Buttigieg to Doraville.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everybody, for joining today. I'm delighted to be back in Georgia, and in particular want to recognize the Mayor's focus on ensuring that roads work for everybody. Yes, for cars, but not only for cars. And we need to make sure that all of our pieces of transportation infrastructure, cars, transit, roadways, buses, and the rest of it are revolving around human beings, instead of human beings always having to revolve around the speed of a vehicle, and I see that vision reflected here. I'm very pleased to be here with Representative McBath, somebody I have admired for a long time, somebody who encouraged me, I think from our very first conversation, to come here and in particular to pay attention to this part of this metro area and all of the needs and the opportunities that are here. I want to recognize Jeff Parker and the folks at MARTA who are with us, as well as the Center for Pan-Asian Community Services, CPACS, which I had a little bit of exposure to during my last visit to Georgia, and you'll hear more from them in a moment, but they're doing such remarkable work here. And gives me a great place to discuss two of the most important things to the Department of Transportation: safety and equity, both of which are at stake in work like what CPACS and the Mayor are seeking to do, with support in Washington from Representative McBath, and also a very sympathetic eye from my department. It's worth noting that today marks the 56th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, and yet around the country we're seeing a lot of attacks on the right to vote. So I'm also mindful that we're in the state that Dr. King called home, that John Lewis called home, that so many others, my friend Stacey Abrams and many more today are here working on voting rights. We also know that civil rights and equity are inseparable from questions of transportation. That's why the work of an organization like CPACS is so important. You help people from communities that have been overlooked or underserved get around with buses like the one that we see here today, so they can go about their lives, buying groceries, worshiping, staying connected with friends and families, and of course, being able to get to work, which is why this is also a conversation about jobs and the economy. We were encouraged to see the good jobs report that came out today reflecting the economic growth that has happened during the Biden-Harris administration. But we know that we've got a long way to go, and we know that a good economy is not just one where the top line numbers are looking good, but where everybody is thriving. This is also why the representatives' support for affordable transit and creating new greenway paths for people who walk and bike are important. The truth is that people of color and lower income Americans are more likely to suffer health impacts from transportation pollution, more likely to depend on public transit, and unfortunately more likely to lose their lives in a traffic crash. And the Buford Highway that is so close to where we're standing today reflects many of these challenges and inequities. The community immediately surrounding us is one of the most diverse in the United States, yet many of the people who live here don't have access to a car, and in the last few years, dozens of pedestrians have been injured or killed in traffic crashes. There is already terrific work now happening at the local level to make sure that everyone has better access to clean, safe, affordable, equitable transportation options. But the reality is the federal government has not been doing enough to help. And that's why we believe this is the moment for a generational investment in our infrastructure, including investments in reconnecting communities, including investments in public transit, pedestrian safety, and more. And with support from leaders like Representative McBath, we see, even as we speak, a historic bipartisan infrastructure deal taking shape. One that promises to create millions of good-paying jobs in this country, one that represents the largest investment in public transit in U.S. history, which is worth noting because of the FTA support for the safety work going on here, not to mention support for an important agency like MARTA, and ways to make sure that we are encouraging the work that CPACS does, as well as the work on roads and bridges, lead pipes, affordable internet, and so many other things. Here in Georgia alone, this bill would represent nearly $1.5 billion of support for public transportation. And of course, so many of those jobs that we believe we can create with this legislation will be created right here in this community. So it's an exciting time to be in transportation, and this is an especially fitting place for us to talk about what's at stake. And with that, I want to turn it over to, again, a leader and a friend, somebody who I'm so glad has encouraged me to come here and see for myself the work that is going on, Representative Lucy McBath.
Thank you so much, Secretary Buttigieg, and thank you so much to the Mayor of Doraville. Thank you so much for your leadership, and good afternoon, and thank each and every one of you for being here today. And we are so grateful to Secretary Buttigieg for joining us, and thank you for your wonderful introduction. Transportation and infrastructure have long been a central part of what makes this community run. And I want to again thank Secretary Buttigieg for all the hard work that he continues to do with the Biden administration to rebuild our crumbling roads and bridges, to ensure our local businesses have the access to the materials and talent that they need to grow, and to make transportation safer, faster, and far more equitable for every American. When I hear from our friends and neighbors across the district about the issues that matter most to them, transportation around the metropolitan Atlanta area is the top of their minds. We have an opportunity right now, as Secretary Buttigieg says, right now to invest in American infrastructure. Roads that make it quicker and safer for all of us to get to work. Walkways that make it safer for pedestrians and cars alike, and access to transportation that makes it easier and far more equitable for everyone to get wherever they need to go. And like any good investment, this bipartisan funding will pay long-term dividends for our communities and for our country. We are creating connections that will give our businesses, big and small businesses, access to the materials that they need to innovate, to access their customers, their growing customer bases, and to access to the hardworking employees who are the heartbeat of our growing economy. And whether it be pedestrian safety improvements right here on Buford Highway, or extending the Path 400 trail, or in transforming and enhancing our bus and rapid transit systems, I am absolutely determined to ensure that our community remains the best place to live and work in America. At its very core, these projects are about safety, about efficiency, and about connectivity, connecting the people with the places that they love, connecting companies and consumers, and connecting Americans to America. Thank each and every one of you again today for being here. It's truly a privilege to be standing with Secretary Buttigieg, Mayor Geierman, and Dr. Kim, who are doing the hard but dedicated and committed work to rebuild and uplift the infrastructure that we all depend on as we work so hard to build back better. And now I'd like to introduce my friend and CPAC's CEO, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon. My name is Jung-Ha Kim. I'm CEO of CPACS, Center for Pan-Asian Community Services Incorporated. We are almost 42 years old, grassroots organization. And in the last some 30 years or so, we made the city of Doraville and Chambly our home. I often share with our wonderful staff at CPACS that we started out by providing transportation service. People used to call from the airport back in the days and ask for a ride. Not having anyone to rely on, not having the language skill, the new immigrants will look through the thick telephone book we used to have and looking for any ethnic organizations that they could actually address their immediate help and need. And we will go out to the airport to pick them up and help them to experience their first day of life in the US. Now, times have changed. People no longer call us from the airport for a ride. And demographics of population that we now serve have changed. But what remains still the same is people's basic need for affordable, safe, and accessible means of transportation. We need green bus. Do you see this? We need green bus, both literally and symbolically, green bus. I also would like to add that CPACS is standing in solidarity with many other communities in need, communities of color, communities that are underserved, who share the same need for safe and affordable means of transportation in our neighborhoods, from our homes, our workplaces, from our schools to community parks, from our senior housing to hospitals. We are honored and encouraged that our nation's Secretary of Transportation is here with us and remembering importance of grassroots communities' basic needs. Our needs may be considered small or insignificant at times, but please enable community-based organizations like ours to serve better the people who we are accountable to. We look forward to working continuously with you, and those of us who are here today, you are our partners and witnesses. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
About with this infrastructure deal, what will it mean for Georgia, and particularly how do you plan on making it equitable for the Black community?
Well, with these dollars, we will be able to improve roads, bridges, And a lot of that is going to have an equity focus, as we've had from day one in the administration. I'll give you a few examples. The dollars for safety, multi-billion-dollar vision for what we can do there, is going to benefit communities of color who are disproportionately likely to lose their lives in crashes. The support for public transit means that that will benefit, of course, the entire community. But as you've seen here, so many who don't have their own cars or who depend on public transit to get to work are, whether it's the black community, refugee, or immigrant communities or others who have been underserved, will be given that leveling equalizer to be able to get to work. I'm also interested in the business opportunity that this represents. We're talking about $1 trillion vision for the years ahead in transportation. And we're standing in the Atlanta area where the construction of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport a couple of generations ago, guided by a visionary mayor, helped build up a black middle class through the construction jobs and the business opportunities it represented. So really every way you look at this, it has so much to benefit us from an equity perspective, as well as safety, climate, job creation, and preparing for the future. And in a place like Georgia that is just multimodal by its very nature, you got it all. Ports, airports, big cities, small communities, suburbs, transit. You're going to see a lot of that benefit coming right here.
The people stranded at the airport due to the cancellation and stealing American Airlines flights. What do you have to say to travelers? What can be done to prevent this?
Yeah, we're very concerned for those passengers who have experienced disruption because of these issues. The two main areas that we focus on in my department, of course, are first safety. And making sure that passenger safety is looked after throughout, including with anything that changes or happens operationally. And second, standing up for consumers. We've recently had a conversation with advocates about what else can be done with the authorities that we have to make sure that passengers know that they're going to have a good experience or be compensated if they're not. Pursuant to the President's recent executive order, we're looking at rules on things like refunds for baggage fees and other things when passengers don't get what is expected when they purchase that ticket. But of course, the most basic thing you expect is to get to where we need to be. And so we're closely following what's happening to those passengers who may have been stranded or disrupted.
I wanted to ask about alternative transit. We can talk a lot about cars, but I want to know what are your priorities for alternative transit for people who don't have access to vehicles?
One of the things I really appreciate about Mayor Geierman's vision is he's describing roadways that serve everybody. Yes, vehicles, but not only vehicles. A roadway needs to be a place where pedestrians and bicyclists and cars and buses, and I would add small businesses on that streetscape, can all coexist peacefully. And that means making sure that the traffic flow is at a safe speed. It means making sure there are ample ways to get across or around that. It means often having dedicated pedestrian or bike lanes. Increasingly, it's going to mean making sure there are things like electric vehicle charging stations along the way too. And all the other measures that make it possible for people, however you get around, whether it's a wheelchair or a car or a bus, that these roadways work for you. As the mayor said, there was a lot of benefit and a lot of harm done by the way that roads were built out in the 50s and 60s. Now, as we have this once-in-a-lifetime level of investment coming, we have a chance to get it right in the 2020s for the future.
Conversation about building a railway in Georgia, is that something that's still on your mind? Do you think about developing infrastructure and transit in the state?
Yes, so this bipartisan infrastructure deal represents the largest level of funding that has gone into rail in this country since Amtrak was created in the first place. Now, a lot of that is just to look after what we have. We've got to fix aging infrastructure in many parts of the country. But it also presents the best opportunity we've had in a long time to maybe expand or add access or routes. I know there's a lot of excitement here in Georgia about some of the possibilities. There's already been a study done on connecting, I believe, up through Charlotte, and there are many other possibilities. And it'll certainly be easier to pursue those possibilities once we can get this bill through and signed by the President. Well, MARTA is serving a large and high growth area. Now, when you have a lot of growth like what you're seeing in the Atlanta region and the suburbs, it's a good problem to have, but it's a real challenge to make sure people can get to where they need to be. And the importance of transit, in this case the importance of MARTA, is to recognize that you sometimes can't build your way out of congestion with just more and bigger roads. Sometimes that works, sometimes that actually just draws that many more cars out. So you've got to have alternatives and choices, and that's the role that MARTA plays in this region. All right. Thanks again for joining us today. Appreciate it.